And here we go with Livy again. We'll just start it off. Chapter 6. Numitor, the nominative. Inter primum tumultum. So, amongst this going on, which was the first things happening in the tumult, in the fray, when it was beginning, the hostes, these are plural, the enemy, invasisse, going into a rather oblique, so it's probably reported speech or something. The enemy had invaded the city and adortos, we see this is in plural accusative going with hostes, and they had attacked the regiam, this is the palace, dictantens. So he was saying this, he was saying that the enemy had come into the city attacking the palace. You use a right oblique for something, verbs of thinking and saying. Cum pubem albanum, these are going together. So these were when the Alban youths that were at Alba Longa, the young men of Alba, into the Archem. So it's coming into the citadel. Presidio armisqui, there's the enclitic. Obtinendem, it's a gerundive, looks like for purpose. And avo casseted. So cum takes this subjunctive. So when he had called the young men of Alba Longa into the sitio, so they could occupy, in this gerund here, as a guard or a defence with arms, and postquam, and after juvenes perpetrata cade, and after the young men had perpetrated this slaughter, they'd carried it out, pergere, continue on, that basically means, and after the young men had continued on, having done this slaughter, he saw them, adse, come to him, gratulantes, that's the present participle of what these young men were doing, they were congratulating him. Extemplo, so on the spot immediately, that's an adverb. Advocato concilio, with a council being called together, or having called together the council, the scellera inse, towards himself, so the crimes towards himself, fratris, of his brother, in the origin nepotem, this is a family linkage, this means it's his grandsons, so the crimes that his brother had done towards him, and the origin of his grandsons, ut, as they had been born, genitae, as they had been reared, and ut cognitius, and this had been formally recognised, the incept, so this means next in turn, the cadem, and then we have a genitive of the tyrant. So the butchering of the tyrant, Caius Eos himself was the author of this. He himself, in turn, had killed the tyrant and ostended. He showed it. So he showed that these boys had been born and raised. He recognised them, and that he himself had killed the tyrant. The juvenes, the young men, per medium contionem, through the middle of this assembly, agmine, it's the ablative singular. So in Gressi, the young men have come in, past passive, with their column of their crew, their band of men, through the middle of the assembly. Cum avum, when, accusative, their grandfather, apposition with king. So when they had greeted their grandfather as king, secuta, they followed, ex omni multitudine, they followed from all of the multitude. Multitude means many, but it's singular as a noun. Conscientens, so they follow from the multitude. A vox consentiens ratum. This means they were all in consent with one voice, thinking. Ratum, the multitude was thinking, and that they had made him king. So he'd killed his brother off, and he was now rightfully the king in name and in imperium and in power. So he was the new monarch. Ita. So thus, numitori to numitor, Albana rei. So the Alban state, permissa, given or entrusted to numitor, we have Romulum and Remus. So Romulus and Remus in the accusative. Accubido. So a desire took Romulus and Remus that in eos locus, that in this place, ubi where expositui, and ubi where they'd been exposed and where they'd been educati, Iran, where they'd been raised. Condende urbis. This is a gerundive going with that. So here they would found a city. And superat multitudino. Genitive and genitive. And so there was an excessive multitude of the Albans and of the Latins. So we'll make this our daily word, supersum, which is superfluous, in excess of what is required in English. And here we come from supersum as the daily dictionary word. I'm superfluous. It also means survive, but that takes a dative. You see this word pretty common in Latin. And so there was an excessive multitude, because add id to this, pastors, shepherds also, arcesserin, they'd summoned or called for the shepherds to come here also, qui omnes, and all who facili spem facerant. Everyone was thinking that, with their hope, that this would easily make Alba small and Lavinium, how do you ever pronounce that? That would be small. Lavinium and Alba would be small, but apparently it was becoming SS. And pray it has different definitions, which can mean because of, and also in comparisons it can be used. So, Urbe quae. So the city which they were going to found, I'd say this must be a comparison. So Alba would be small and Lavinium would be small in comparison to the city which they were about to found. Intervenit deinde. So then there intervened his cognitionibus. Amongst all these considerations and thinkings were going on, there intervened the malum arbitum. This is like the misfortunes of their grandfathers. Cupido regni, desires of kingship, and inde, and then a fodem curtimen. So this is like a foul contest, coortum, which had arisen. Okay. This is by desire of kingship and all the problems their grandfathers had caused. From a satis mitai principio. So from a very satisfactory beginning, or mitai, which is a mild beginning, then aroused this huge disgusting contest between the two of them. Moving on. Quoniam, since Gemini essent. So, since they were twins, nec aetus veracundia discrimen facere posset. And not by age were they able to make, this often means shame and stuff, but it's probably meaning something more like, in this contest of modesty, or whatever you want to call it, or basically who was the oldest, because we've got age there. They couldn't figure that out. Ut D quorum tutelae ea loca essent auguris legerent. So D is the gods would choose of whom the tutelage of this place. They were the gods that watched over this place. They would choose this auguries, which is another religious thing, of qui nomen nove urbi daret, of who would give the name to the new city, and who would rule this with imperio, who would have the power to rule the city they founded. Romulus, the Palatium hill. Remus, the Aventine hill. Capiant, they took for the inaugurations. That's another gerund for this temple. So going over that a little bit again, yeah. They were both twins. They didn't know who should be revered because of age. And so the gods of this place would choose by some sort of auguries of who would name the city and who would rule it. They chose their places and they took their place for this inauguration. Chapter 7. Priore remo augurium venisse furtor, sex vultures. So first of all, in the prior place, furtor, it is said, an augury came to Remus. That's a dative. 6 vultures. Yamqui, and now, nuntatio augurio. Now with this augury announced, cum duplex. when double the numerous, when duplex numerous, when double the number, ostenditse, showed itself to Romulus, as when between 12 vultures, utrumque, to both of the sides, regem sua multitudino consalaverat. So they hailed, each multitude hailed their own leader as king. Tempore. So in that time, Ili, which is a demonstrative pronoun for meaning the former guy, praecepto tempore, basically by instructions of the time, in the order that they happened, the first guy claimed kingdom, but hic, the second guy, bant means they, so they dragged him as the king, count of the number of the birds, numero avium. So the former by time and the later by the number of birds, they wanted him to be king. Inde, so then, cum altercatione congressi, so when they come together, they congress together in an altercation, it's ablative, by the contest, ararum ad caedum vertuntor, that's passive. So by the contest, they turned to anger, the anger was turned to slaughter, so they come to blows and blood. Ibi in turba ictus remus cacidit. Nice short sentence. There, in this crowd, couldn't even be confusion, ictus remus. Remus was struck down, cacidit. That's a repetitive thing, cacidit. And he fell. Vulgatio fama est. So the more common, that's a comparative, the more common rumour is, in a ludubrio, which is a mocking of his brother, that's genitive, Remus transulisse, over the novos muros. Remus had jumped over the new walls. Inde ab irato Romula. So then, from an irate Romulus, cum verbis quoque increpitans, that's the present participle, when he rebuked him with words, also adjectus, he also added, sic de inde quicumque alius transiliat moena mea interfectum. Thus then, anyone else who should transiliate my walls interfectum. So thus then, should anyone else interfectum die who jumps over my wall. Ita solus potitius imperio Romulus. Romulus is the nominative. So thus, solus Romulus, Romulus alone, potitus, past passive participle. He had obtained imperio. Romulus alone obtained the power. Condita urbs conditoris nominea appellata. So the urbs is the nominative. With the city founded, condited, it was appellated, another one going with the city. So the founded city was called nomine, by the name conditoris, of its genitive, of its founder. Pallatium primum in quo ipsi erat educatus munit. So first of all, the Pallatium hill, in which ipse erat himself, erat educatus, in which he himself had been reared. You can see that's a nominative past passive, because in which he himself had been reared. Munit, he fortified, first of all, the Palatine hill. Sacra dis alius albano ritu. Sacrifice to the other gods in the rite of Albano, of Alban custom, Alban rite. In Greek, Hercules to Hercules. Hercules was a god. Ut ab Evandro instituta erat. As these were instituted by Evander, who was mentioned earlier on, facit, he did this. So he made these sacrifices to the other gods in that way, in the Greek to Hercules, as had been instituted by Evander. Herculeum in Ioloca, Geriono interrepto. So Hercules, with having killed this bloke Gerion in this place, in Ioloca, so these are his oxen or his cattle, Mira spece, with a wonderful appearance, abegesse, he had driven these cattle memorand. This is, people remember this, that's why Hercules is in the accusative. So people who remember that Hercules, having killed this bloke, he drove these cattle into this place with a wonderful appearance, and Propo Tiberium Fluvium, and near the Tiber River, qua, which means which, pray see, we'll have to see what version of pray this is, Armentum. This is these beasts, basically. Again, see, he was driving these beasts of burden. Nando, the Tajaran, by swimming, Trey Yekaret. So he'd cross by swimming the Tiber River, pushing these beasts before himself. Loco herbido. So this is in a place where the grass grows. Ut, so that quiete, so that in rest, and pabulo lato, so there was happy grazing, a place where you could rest and get happy grazing. The boves, these cattle refrigerated. So they recovered themselves on the green grass in the rest, and ipsum fessum via, and himself tired from the road, procubisi, he lay down to sleep.